It's really interesting how context. خليها دقيقتين. So Gillo, I'm very happy to have you on this AI in Practice podcast, where we discuss artificial intelligence in the industry, because as you know, AI has been buzzing for some time now, and it's all over the place. People are very excited about it, yet you can find very, very little traces of AI in the industry, especially if you're not Amazon or Google. You find very, very little traces about AI. You can find many startups and many companies, speak about artificial intelligence, speak about their excitement, express their excitement about the technology, yet you can find very, very little traces, from our experience, of course, very little traces of AI in the market. So this is why we created this podcast, to actually speak about everything that happens when AI is in the market, what's going to happen, what are the challenges, how businesses can benefit from it. And no one, I think, is better in this market to speak about AI in the market other than yourself.
Thank you, sir.
So Gillo, please introduce yourself to the audience, and then we can take it from there.
Sure. Galal ElBeshbishy, co-founder of Synapse Analytics, of course, your partner.
Yeah. Pleasure meeting you.
Yeah, pleasure's all mine. And should I be speaking to you a little the camera, since you know?
I know. So we have some audience in the
we have some
with us tonight. So guys, they're waving at us.
Yeah.
So guys, do you think we should look at the camera or look at each other, because we're very new to this? And
I think I'll just look at you.
Yeah.
Tamam. I worked.
So let's talk like no one's watching.
Ooh, okay. I graduated as a mechanical engineer. I worked on bio-inspired tech for a couple of years, and then started the company with you. And been doing this for 4.5-5 years thus far, and it's been ever exciting.
Yeah.
So much looking forward to the road ahead.
Yeah. So this was before you got thrown out from a very, very exciting offer. Do you want to speak about it, or
no.
Is this confidential? This is
I wasn't thrown out. Nomenclature was.
This is. I think it's a bit confidential. So it's a bit confidential. So let's not talk about it. So Galal had a very, very exciting offer at one of the very, very exciting. Not exciting. One of the very esoteric and prestigious organizations in the world. And he actually decided not to take it, to pursue entrepreneurship and to pursue this incredible journey. So, Gelo, you now AI has been buzzing for some time now, and I'm starting to believe that companies are usually more excited to talk about AI rather than actually taking action to adopting the technology. And it's not coming from vain. It's not coming. It's coming from somewhere that has to do with the confusion in the industry, what it really takes to actually adopt artificial intelligence and to adopt it in the business and to really use it. And in the 70s and the 80s, there were 2 AI winters where AI was extremely exciting, and then it died out because, of course, the lack of computational power, the lack of data, and so on. And because a lot of companies have invested in AI, and some of them may not have seen the expected results. Some disengagement maybe is happening in the industry. Do you think this is true? And if you do think so, why do you think this is coming from?
Okay. So if we're talking about AI winters and what used to happen in the past, and looking at the climate right now, I wouldn't say that we're in an AI summer, though, right? And for sure not an AI winter. Maybe we're in that stage where it's an AI autumn, if I may say.
Yeah.
In between both. And however, the way I see it actually, the outlook for it in the future, I think it's going to lean more towards summery seasons. And however, there are a lot of risks associated with the climate right now, and I think the main reason why it hasn't been always booming and funding is that high in AI, and the main reason why we have AI winter is actually is not AI itself. So the way I want to actually, a better way to frame this is AI winters is not actually caused by shortcomings in AI, but maybe it's actually about the association of what AI can actually do and how we actually see it in action or in production. So I think the main fear with another AI winter coming soon might be that we've seen already some AI models graduate and being consumed and served into production. At least there's a good percentage of that. However, we've seen also just a bigger chunk not actually reaching production and actually not being productized or served. So I think the main threat to another AI winter season would be moving AI to production. And once people realize that, there's a lot of hype about the research part and about really the intelligence part and what you can build and all the metrics and how accurate it can become. And much less on, okay, how is this being deployed? Is it actually in production or not? So I think this gap, it might be the actual reason for another AI winter. And again, the culprit is not AI in that sense, is really how and just the climate is around the field right now. Another thing I would look at is actually also the research industry, right? There's a lot of funding being poured in that, and you see a lot of people spending millions and millions just to get, you know, a few decimal points more accurate model, right? However, take this model and try to apply it to production. It's just a different it's just a different beast, right? So I think also moving the funding from that, or even changing the playbook of the research industry, which gets funneled in a lot of money, and just focusing on just metrics that make much more sense. I think the thing that can offset that and really move it into more of a summary season might be that people now are aware of the commercial viability of AI, and people are actually seeing what it can do, right? Specifically just models that are tailored to the consumer side, recommendation engines like Netflix, Amazon, all of that. There's a few use cases that people are very aware of and understand the capabilities of AI, and now that it's in the commercial space and people can see how it can bring in money to the industry and all of that, and this actually hasn't been happening before, right? And this is because of the availability of data, and just 90% of the data of today has been generated in the past couple of years. So people are seeing just the effect of that. So it's just a trade-off, and this is why I think we're in between. And if we maneuver this correctly, I think we can really blast through and just keep a summer season for much longer.
I really like the word different animal that you just used, because I think it's
this is what you liked from all of us. Different animal.
No, the thing is, when and I think we deal with this a lot when we go to a company and we're trying to consult them about their AI use case. Usually we deal with a mentality that is coming from the legacy from the 90s IT procurement cycles. So where
we love these guys though.
Of course. Though the thing is that they try to really measure the viability and the whole. They try to buy AI like they're about to buy, for example, an enterprise CRM software or an enterprise ERP. So they usually are not comparing apples to apples. So they try to talk to you about the deliverables, although the deliverables of AI are a bit, because of course AI and machine learning and data science are exploratory in nature. So you get a piece of data or you get a data sample and you're not really sure what's going to come out of this data. So they really put the wrong metrics, or they come from a very, very legacy frame of mind that usually doesn't do the AI project any justice. And they look at the wrong things. They try to tell you, in your contracts, in your proposals, we need this and that, like they're buying a legacy IT system, basically. So how do you think, of course, you've seen more than 30 use cases across 12 industries, and you've deployed and actually scaled AI projects in all of those industries. So from your perspective and from your experience, how can a person who's usually very who has a very instilled process about how they go about technology, about how they procure technology. What is the difference? What is the difference between really buying AI and buying like a very traditional piece of software, piece of enterprise software?
So I think, it was very well put from your side in terms of describing how the process really is with the legacy teams or just the IT mindset. I think it is normal though, and it is to be expected because how people actually think and they want to find a comparable to whatever you're offering them, so they can really understand and bridge whatever gap in understanding there could be. So the way, obviously, you coming from the background that we're coming from, and just how we position ourselves as a company, and just being a software company by nature, and also selling AI as well. People just try to match you to the closest thing that they've seen or that is familiar to them. We've also made the mistake of just ignoring that altogether and pushing and being very stubborn in terms of how we present our solutions. And we used to, and you're of course very familiar with this, we built it together, and just the structure of selling and just positioning ourselves in a different space than traditional software. The problem with that was really that people still couldn't really get rid of whatever they've learned before, right? And it's very hard for them to get used to the new structure in terms of business model, in terms of payment, in terms of now are you selling a model or are you selling a technology? Who's liable on the accuracy of that model? Who owns the IP? It's just a different discussion altogether. So I think what we've done that I think has been very successful is acknowledge these comparables from the get-go and making sure that we can do the comparison ourselves. So we don't leave them the space to actually think about and compare and then come back to you with something that doesn't make sense. Actually, you write down, just at the start, hey guys, we know that this is how you're used to actually buying this kind of software or this technology that are similar. Here is why we're not very similar, and here is why this structure makes the most sense for this type of technology. And also it's very important to clear just what exactly will make this project successful, because ERP implementations, for example, can take such a long time, and then it's a software, it's very robust and just plug and play, and you never really use all the features. And you don't use it for its predictive capabilities, right? Just use it because it's software, keeps everything intact. And
although it's usually sold as predictive software, so and we've met this a lot with some of our clients. We go in and they tell us we have this ERP that we bought from this certain vendor, and we have an AutoML functionality that is able to automatically predict sales. And then once we dig a little bit deeper, we really understand that this is not the case. And as you said before, it's really difficult to automate the predictions in an ERP, because it really depends on the data and the data engineering that happens at the beginning.
Yeah, and I think exactly, and I think this is another issue, right? That a lot of these other systems can really, they put in or they include AI as an auxiliary to whatever they're selling, and because it's very easy for you to say this is ML empowered, this is ML powered, this is artificial intelligence, all of that. It really boils down to the accuracies of these things and how actually efficient these things are. So it's not just about, I've applied AI into that use case. Maybe it doesn't make sense for you to even apply AI to that use case, right? As our CTO used to always say, what this problem doesn't actually need AI, right? And then most of the time he was correct.
He was right. So we didn't want to believe him at first, though.
Yeah, because he was coming in as an AI manager. And once we found him just trying to avoid all of the AI use cases, this is when he decided actually to move into the CTO position, just leave AI altogether, and just lead the forefront of the company. So I think just the way that they brand it or the way that they include it in their offering just makes the conversation maybe. I don't think it's harder, because we can really rebuttal things like that very easily, and you've seen us do that, and you do it yourself. It's very straightforward. Like, okay, you guys don't use this functionality, and if you were to use it, you wouldn't really budget or forecast your actual sales based on that tool, right? Because these guys are not liable for anything, and it's not enough, right? And if you look at the funding space for the AutoML play altogether, you'd see the valuations here and the amount of funding required just for that AutoML or that just that sub-segment of their tool, how big it is, and you'll understand that you can't just have that embedded in just another solution that as a whole company just is valued as much less, for example. And it's a very hard problem to tackle as well. So I think this is something that we've faced before.
So also one of the things about AI that I think it's I was telling Salim last week that it feels like for the past
Shout out to Salim, by the way.
shout out to Salim. He's
Mhm.
back in Virginia.
Yeah.
We hope you had a safe trip.
It's my old school.
Yeah, it's your school as well. So he's concluding his PhD. So let's wish him luck. So I was telling him last time that it feels like for the past 5 or 6 years, companies were investing to really learn about the technology, especially companies that are coming from traditional, like financial institutions, retailers, and so on. They have been experimenting. They have been hiring like data scientists, AI engineers, and they have built a lot of models. Now it feels like there's a race that is about to start for them to ship these models into the market, and it's some because of course we really specialize in this area. This is why I think it's very important to take your take on the subject. So basically they're all standing at the beginning, at the start line of the race, and someone is about to fire starting shot, and they're about to push all of the models, all of the experimentation, and all of what they have been toying with for the last 5 or 6 years into the market. Now they're about to be surprised. What are the surprises that they will face? What kind of challenges they will face? Cultural, technical. So what are the warning signs, the early warning signs that you want to give them before they start the race?
Yeah, so I think it's a very nice analogy that you just described. I also I mean, to your point, I think there's a lot of issues. I mean, there's a very popular statistic that says 85% of built models, right, of built AI, struggles to get shipped into production. Or actually, never actually sees the
light
servant.
of day.
Yeah,
Never
just
sees the summer.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Never sees the summer. And then, so why does that happen, right? There are many reasons for that, and I think all the companies that are much more focused on just building the AI itself and less on the deployment part and how to manage that thing into production will be surprised, as you're saying. And I think many of these can be boiled down to, there's many reasons for that. I think one would be governance and really ethics of building the AI, because the way that the AI is built, right, it requires to learn from certain data, right?
Yeah.
People commonly mistaken AI for it not to be usually biased, because the answers or whatever results or the output is really governed by a certain black box or a certain model that is not humanly controlled. However, the way that the model is trained is hugely biased by and influenced by whoever's actually building that model, right? So if you feed it biased data, it will spit out very biased results. So actually, again, taking the liability on something like that and actually being able to govern such a system inside of your company and making sure that it is unbiased. It is unbiased. It goes through all the checks that you want it to go through, and make sure that before it's shipped into production, no biases are there. It's governed very it's very transparent, and the governance is just clear and all of that, and abides by all the regulations that you want it to abide by. So I think this is one concern, just not having that governance structure and just treating it as just have an accurate model that can put into production. It's usually not that simple. Another big one is really culture, how you actually interface with that model and how exactly it fits within the organization. Usually AI is here to make things more efficient. Usually these things were already in production, or actually not in production. People were actually doing that manually, or there was human input, or actually people doing that as their core job. And now this thing is coming in, and is it going to take my job, right?
Yeah.
Is it going to replace me down the line? Is this thing here to assist me or just to replace me down the line? So this is also something that easing this transition or making sure, because if we want to be very honest, some roles will be replaced by AI, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we all know this. However, the way that is going to be used at first for it to become successful, you will have to have that blend of human intervention with AI for it to become successful, and then really find other roles for that person that was using that technology or actually is now replaced by that technology, to find something else to actually build or actually help in deploying that AI solution, making sure that is as efficient as it can be. So really culture plays very important, and is this model being brought up top down, right, from your manager down to you, or is it something that's being brought up from the team and then trying to be sold to the management? I think this also plays a huge part in really saying, will this actually see the light or not? So culture is a huge thing, governance is another. I think other things have to do with transparency, right? Monitoring that model. When these models, because again, if you take a step back and you think about what's really different about AI than other traditional programming, right? And really, AI is just code written by data, right? That's the only difference versus traditional programming. So now that the code is written by data, I don't really understand what these guys are laughing, so I'm just a little disrupted by them. So, so as I was saying,
Because this is like Galal's main statement, like AI is just software written by data. So this is why, this is like his signature phrase. So
yeah, it's my go-to. It's my go-to
Yeah,
phrase
go-to
when I try to
phrase.
explain
yeah,
AI.
and
So-
our CTO is just sitting in the back and give us these judgmental looks.
Yeah,
Shout out to Shady Fanous, our
Yeah.
CTO, and
yeah, he's
a brother in arms.
Yeah.
It's,
yeah. So yeah, back to my point. So again, as we were saying, AI is just software written or code written by data, and so the lack of transparency here can really be a big reason why the AI never sees the light. You don't really understand what happened. How are these rules formulated? There's a lot of techniques that help you bridge that gap as well. However, just the lack of transparency itself can be also another reason why AI is rarely ever deployed into production. And then also just maintaining and covering all the life cycles from anything that has to do with the deployment and just anything that is post-deployment, actually, the deployment, monitoring, retraining, all of that stuff. You need to govern it very well. And then there's also just the fusion of responsibility of once the model is shipped, whose responsibility is it? Is it the DevOps team and MLOps team right now? Or is it still the data scientist's role to actually monitor data drift and monitor that the model is always accurate, any biases that happen? Who actually owns that cycle? If you talk to, just engineering managers in a lot of companies, they would actually, they build it very differently, right? There's no uniform way or one uniform methodology that everyone is following right now. And I think there's a race right now to actually standardize this. However, it hasn't been standardized yet. So this is also, making companies struggle with the deployment of AI as well within their organization. So I think all of these together make up for the 85% of the models that don't actually see the light, and the other, just 15% is us.
So this is one of the things that I told you. It's really exciting that we're having this very general discussion about AI and machine learning, because we really never have a chance to do that on our day-to-day work. And I'm absolutely in love that you're bringing words like governance, like transparency, to a very technical solution, or a very emerging technology, because usually in companies technology is at least from a business perspective, technology is just a very siloed and boxed department that nobody wants to touch. They're doing their work, everything is working, let's not ask, let's not do anything about them. These guys know what they're doing, let's keep it as it is. But now you're bringing things that are usually words that are usually used in more of an organizational change or organizational structure kind of way. We want transparency about how the AI is built, about the data that the AI was built on, the governance about when the AI is ready, who is to approve if it's ready, who is to approve if it's to be launched to market without invading any privacies. So this brings in something that is really different when deploying AI. Usually it's one of the most, for any organization, one of the most multidisciplinary projects you can ever take on. And now from an organizational perspective as well, the organization structure itself sometimes might need changing to be able to adapt and to be able to adopt AI faster, or maybe just adopt AI. And one of the things that I'm not sure if this is true or not, but I believe that the data scientists for the past few years were just trapped in the POC stage, in just, they're doing some experiments, they go to the management, they pitch their projects to the management, they're very happy about their projects, the management is excited, but the management usually forgets about it like 2 days later, and the project just goes nowhere. And this is very disengaging to the data scientist. But what you're speaking about is that maybe if we do some sort of like organizational change, bring some new form of governance to the organization itself, this could actually accelerate or expedite the AI process or launch into market. So is this do you see this is something that is essential for an organization that is adopting AI?
100%. I think you have to be very agile when deploying such a technology, and you have to have there's a lot of moving parts when it comes to actually successfully deploying AI. So you have to be ready to make these org changes, right? It's as if you're bringing on a new talent for the new role that you haven't had for the past few years, and you have to do all these maneuvering. Actually, we had one of our investors actually said something that was very interesting. I don't know if you remember when he talked about adopting AI is like acquiring a company, right?
Yeah.
So really acquiring this company that functions in its own way and then trying to make it blend with your existing processes and all of that. And I think I really like that analogy, because when we try to explain it to them, this was their point, and they were like, oh, okay, then this is familiar actually. When we do that, we struggle also with just uniforming and standardizing everything across and just leveraging everything that has been built. So I think, again, building AI might be a little easier than acquiring a company. And adopting it within the organization might also, again, be easier because you already build it with the organization in mind. Versus just, another company doing its own thing and then another company coming and acquiring it. So I think definitely there's some organizational change that has to happen. But I think, again, a lot of companies approach this in a way that I would not advise, and that is, I just want to bring in AI into my company without really thinking about the scope in mind or where exactly can AI really help me, right? And for you to go and say, okay, AI will help me with that use case, I think it always has to come from, okay, you have to understand what AI can provide you. So you have all the tools, and then you look at your business and say, okay, what are my priorities in spite of AI, right? And then if you see that, okay, now that I understand what AI is doing, I think I can really create a revenue stream here, or I can optimize here or there. And this is why a lot of the MBFIs are leveraging AI right now, even in our side of the world, right? Because when it comes to credit scoring, it's directly on their balance sheets, so it's directly on their books, and you can definitely see the effect of that. And there's something that you can compare it to. And also the AI, once it's deployed, it's actually fully integrated into your system. So you don't actually need to do all of these changes within your organization to adopt. There's definitely some change that has to happen, right? And we've seen that and we struggled with it till we made it work. However, it's just much more obvious where it fits, right? Because it just comes in, for example, in the credit scoring space. So I come in, these inputs come into that system, and then it spits out a score for me. And depending on that score, I will actually accept them or not and stuff like that. And this is something that I used to do before as an organization. Right now, I'm able to create more programs just because I have AI in my organization. I want to leverage all of that data and de-risk and hedge against someone leaving, a credit risk officer maybe leaving me the next day. Actually, now everything is modularized and it's into code. So you can own that intelligence as IP within your organization. So again, it's de-risking a little bit against the human labor, right? So I think this is why we've seen huge success with this use case. Another use case I always think about is it's in the pathology field, right? When you talk about preventative diagnostics. So I think why is this very relevant is when you look at companies that we've worked with in the past in the healthcare industry, right? You can build very, very powerful models in the pathology field. You can build preventative diagnostic models. You can build just models that you would think from the outside, those are super helpful. Those can really save lives, right? And then you go to the business and you look at their business model, and you can't really see a fit of where can this fit into my business model. So everything is on hold. They like it. They can keep it. They're struggling to find ways to actually leverage that within their organization, so even though it's a very
back to your word, commercializing AI.
Exactly, yeah.
So one of the things also that we face a lot is some business people and some business users are really excited about AI, and they see all the use cases. They read the McKinsey and the Harvard Business Review case studies, and they get very excited. They go to the management, but usually they're unable to sell it internally. They usually are faced with the question, how can we measure impact? So we don't have really the KPIs. How can we, if I'm buying a project, or if I'm investing in a data science or an AI team to build this AI use case, I really cannot sell to the management what we'll get out of this. And when I speak to AI engineers, when I speak to data scientists, they usually don't give me a clear answer. So it's usually, we'll see the data, we'll see. So we have, we've made a few predictions, some segmentation to to the customers, but it's really the nature of the field itself is very exploratory. So you can't really gauge impact really, because impact is very much dependent on the adoption of the use case, on what the data can provide, what models we're using. So it has a lot of variables. So how would you let them think about really bringing some sort of a KPI or an impact frame of work to be able to better scope their projects and better sell it internally?
Okay, so two things about this. So when you talk about, because you're the CEO of Synapse, why are you laughing? Because you're the CEO of Synapse and all of that, you really love the field, you're passionate about it. So you understand that the field is exploratory and all of that. I'm sorry, I just ate, so it's heavy. So yeah, when it comes to, again, so because you're the CEO of Synapse Analytics and you understand the nature of the exploratory nature of the field and the business itself. So you always think about it as people need to experiment. They need to look at it. It's very hard to gauge the impact. However, the way I would approach it, and the way I would advise businesses to actually think about it is you have to actually be able to gauge impact or just get a sense of it before you engage with the exploration side of things. Why is that? It's because as a business, you should be able to realize, okay, I have a big problem here. If I'm able to, for example, reduce my stock on hand, right? Just save a little bit on my working capital, right? How would that affect the metrics that I really care about as a business, right? Just an example. If I build a lead scoring engine, right? So if how much savings can really happen in that space? Is it worth for me to invest in deploying AI in a space where the room for you to save is not that big?
So what do you mean by lead scoring? Because
sure. So I'm just giving an example of a scope. Lead scoring is when you really have a list of people that you want to reach out to, for example. You just want to rank them and see who actually is more likely to converge. You know? So it depends on whatever kind of promotion you're doing. If you have a database that only has 1,000 people and the way to reach out to them is just, there's only one way to reach out to them, for example, and it's not that costly. Would it make sense for me to save a few bucks on just building a state-of-the-art lead scoring engine? However, if you look at, the use case itself, there isn't really room for you to cost save on that use case. It wouldn't really make sense for me as a business to invest in AI, right? However, when I look at my business and I look at, okay, I have a big problem here. There's a lot of room to save money here. The way I would think about it is usually what I tell clients is throw yourself in the future, right? If you already knew that these guys are going to converge, or if you already knew how much sales you're going to actually achieve, if you already knew all of these facts that your business is currently doing, what would you have done differently in hindsight, right? Becomes a very easy problem. I would have saved on this and that. I would have purchased less here, would have maybe purchased more there. And so this is what AI can really help you with. So if you think that you being in the future right now and looking back at your business, there's a lot that you could have saved, that there's so much opportunity that you missed on. And you think if you find that space, then you think, okay, can AI really help me with that? Can I build a model that is accurate enough to predict that future for me, right? If the case is yes, you start doing some due diligence, right? You look at the data. Do I have some essence here? Do I have enough data to actually build powerful models, right? How feasible is that use case, right? How urgent is it? You start to think of certain variables and then say, okay, this makes sense for me to explore, and now I can deploy I can invest a little bit in that area, because I know that the reward, if I do it very well and if I come out successful out of it, the reward will really outweigh the cost that I've actually invested. So this is just an approach that I usually advise our clients to take on. And when we come in and try to scope or sell any of our scopes to a client, this is the same way that you think about it, because we really care about, dollar retention and just people not churning and just taking. So whatever use case that we think of investing in with the client on, we need to make sure that they are going to reap these rewards, and it will make sense for them to continue and keep paying for them, and we can really maximize our revenue even as a company. So I think it's really just allocating that intelligence to the areas that make sense for a business. And you've seen this before. We go to clients and they want to pay a lot of money for a certain AI engine that we don't think will generate the impact that they want. And this is when we pull out, right? And we've done that before a few times. And I think it's very important for us to keep practicing that. And I think for businesses to be aware of, okay, it's a nice technology to have. It's booming. It's summer season, right? For AI. But does it make sense for my business right now? Do I have what it takes, right? And then And so if you have that
And
mindset, you will find.
are you willing to change again because if you're deploying AI, your organization would it would really need to change.
Again,
and are you ready for that?
If the room, if the delta, just the opportunity of, because when you deploy AI, you get things right, or you're aiming to get some stuff right, because the models are supposedly accurate if you're going to put them into production. So if I build a state-of-the-art AI and this thing works, and then it's going to save me millions of dollars, trust me, as an organization, I will be willing to change my org, right, to actually reap those rewards. So again, it comes back to the more of an opportunity. And so the thing is also, management has to actually realize how much of an opportunity this is. And also they have to understand, for example, the way that we design models, and we talk about this all the time, for you to gauge the accuracy of a model, or say that this model is good or it's bad, or do I take this one into production or that one? It's not always the same metrics that you look at, right? You have to look at the business itself and the costing side of it, and then really decide on the metrics that you want to look at, right? Because you can have a 99% accurate model, right? And then you try to deploy it, right? And then the recall, which is just a metric of how much coverage, right, you actually have from your model, is very slim. However, it's very accurate. When you look at the economics of a business, actually they might be better off with a 70% accuracy model with much higher recall, much higher coverage, because the cost of getting a prediction wrong does not always equate the benefit of getting a prediction right. So this is at the end of it.
Can you say that again? So the cost of
the cost of getting a prediction wrong does not always equal. Actually, rarely does it equal the benefit of getting a prediction right. So this is why you don't always look at the same metrics.
So getting a prediction wrong,
so for
does
example,
not have the same bad influence or bad effect as the benefits of getting a prediction right.
So if I were to give you a certain batch, right, to upsell a certain product, right? Now, how much would my business actually be hurt if I'm actually upselling certain customers that don't end up buying, right? I'm paying, of course, there's some cost associated to it, but if my product is very expensive and the margin is very healthy, right, and it's very easy to communicate to the guys, then actually I would be happy that 10 people actually don't bite and buy my product. But if 3 people actually, on the other hand, buy it, so I have 10 that don't and just 3 that do, even though the accuracy is not that high, but in terms of economics, it really makes sense for my business, right? So this is why I wouldn't really want to solve for a batch of just, in that case, let's just take another example of a batch of just 2 people and just getting 50% right. So just one of them converging, right? So I would actually much rather get 10 wrong and 3 right in that specific case. So this is why it's always good to look at the economics of the business and how that actually makes sense. It becomes very obvious in use cases of churn, for example, lead scoring, excuse me, even credit scoring. I have to cut this part. I shouldn't share it.
That's fine.
I think I should take a sip. Sorry.
So Galal, this was all a very interesting discussion. Now, let me ask you this. What really excites you about AI? Because I really don't know the answer for that question. What's the most interesting thing that is happening from your perspective about the artificial intelligence industry right now?
Honestly, it's just going to be a boring answer, but what is really exciting for me about AI is really seeing AI live in production. I mean, I don't really care about the use case itself. I just want to see AI in production, see that people are maintaining it within the organization. I think this is very sexy, right? Having that AI deployed within your organization, it works, it's monitored, people actually know how to interface with it and all of that. Whatever the use case is, if you do that successfully, I believe this is just going to put you, a million steps forward versus all your competition. So
I have this picture in my mind when AI is really adopted in the organization, and I mean really adopted. I see like a CEO coming into his office and then just asking questions for the AI, and the AI is doing everything for like it. Of course, it really understands the query or the ask from the CEO, and it does for example all the RPAs and does all the predictions and analyzes all the images and all the invoices and just gets the answer just like that to the CEO, and the CEO is now able to decide, or actually it would let the AI decide on what is the best next action, and then it would decide right away. and this is really, you know, the vision of a really AI powered organization, the picture that I have in mind.
Yeah, you know, actually, what
So-
excites me is kind of the opposite, actually, and I really appreciate when it
So
comes
the AI
from the,
asking the CEO about the business.
yeah, and then the CEO
The
answering,
CEO
you know,
answer,
going
yeah.
ahead and doing all that. No, actually, it's the other way around. I'm just talking not top management, but actually, just if you trickle it a little down, and we've seen in a lot of our applications, you know, just blue collars or even very functional employees in certain organization interface with the AI, and they've previously had very little know-how in terms of how to interface with AI, what exactly is AI, and now even their language and nomenclature changes, you know, when they talk about AI, and now they can interface with it, they can use it, they ask you very smart questions about how it's doing things,
Yeah.
and they can find gaps that you wouldn't think of when you're developing, because these guys are the ones that actually are deploying it. So when I see this dynamic and I see that the you know, just from a bottom-up approach to AI is for me much more comfortable to get, you know, comfortable with, and it's just when we see, and we've seen that a lot, and we've seen also the other side where CEOs are the ones actually leveraging the AI. And however, if you look at just the 30 plus deployments that we have, it's mostly and the ones that are the most successful is when the operations guys or
Are the ones
the ones who actually
consuming
consume the AI
yeah.
are the ones that are interfacing and
Yeah.
actually leveraging the AI to the max. So
Yeah.
this is why this is the picture that I think is exciting. When someone calls me up and tells me الماشين النهارده عمل كذا كذا, it's very exciting for me because it's they are, first of all, they call it the machine, and then they continue عادي ranting. So again, when they talk about that and talk about the machine as a
person,
as someone who actually understands
as a character,
and then it's like machine اتلخبط or stuff like that. Yeah, well, I mean, I love that. This becomes it's very exciting, and the way they respect it, they understand where it fits within the organization. They understand its limitations. They can talk about it openly. They can use it in their ops. They're not scared of it. They don't think this is just magic or whatever, or this is something that will never work. So, and I think this really comes from a bottom-up approach to this, and this is when management actually, when they hear about that from the guys who are actually working there, the ops team,
it has to be very exciting.
The testament is as much higher.
So, Gillo, this is actually, I think, the longest we've talked without using the words budget or shady.
Yeah. Shady or shady?
Shady. So one very interesting fact, when Shady and I were in London, everyone was very excited about his name because his name is Shady, and Fanous, usually they've read it famous, so Shady Famous. So it's definitely an incredible rapper's name. So a shout out to Shady Famous.
Yeah, and if you look at I mean, he's read that. Shady, you want to join? You just want to show your face for a second?
No, he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to. I think he's.
I think it's because his hair is.
Yeah. So
he's letting it flow. So
thank you, Gillo, for giving this time. Thank you, everyone, for watching or for listening, and to the next one from AI in Practice.
Thank you, guys.
Love you. Bye-bye.